People go missing every single day, and unfortunately, some of their disappearances will always remain an unsolved mystery. When there's a pattern in the type of victims that go missing, police typically believe it's the work of a serial killer. But in the case of Missing 411, the explanation to these disappearances could be something else entirely. A retired police officer named David Paulides noticed similarities in unsolved disappearances occurring near national parks. Just a few of these common traits are that none of the victims left behind a scent trail for search dogs to find. Search parties will spend months looking for them, and the bodies are never recovered. Sometimes their clothes are found in an area that had already been searched hundreds of times before. Paulides went on a personal mission to solve these mysteries, or to at least gather as much information as humanly possible. He compiled his findings in his book series called Missing 411. He's also gone on to film a documentary. Out of the respect for the families, Paulides never shares his own personal theories about what happened to these people. Fans of his work try to use these cases as proof of Bigfoot, aliens, or interdimensional wormholes. Some think it could be a clan of cannibals living in the wilderness, or maybe they were dragged off by mountain lions or bears. The strangest cases, though, are when these people are found alive to tell their story, and yet there is no still logical explanation for why they disappeared. So let's get into our first story. In February 1977, a 24-year-old man named Stephen Kibaki was cross-county skiing through the snow near Lake Michigan. Once he reached the edge of the lake, he took his skis off to sit down and rest. When he got up to leave, his own tracks were gone, and he became lost. The last thing he remembers was walking through the snow, feeling numb and exhausted. He blacked out. In the blink of an eye, it was spring. He was lying in a grassy field in the middle of a forest, wearing clothes that weren't his. Sitting next to him was a stranger's backpack, containing running shoes and glasses that did not belong to him either. He hiked to the nearest town and asked a local resident where he was. They told him he was in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, 700 miles away from where he had been skiing. His aunt and father lived in Pittsfield, so he knocked on his aunt's door. His family was in shock, hugging him and asking where he had been. Kibaki had been missing for 14 months. When Kibaki had first gone missing, the search team found his poles and skis at the edge of the lake. There was only one set of his footprints leading towards the water, but none walking away. They could only assume he drowned himself in the freezing lake. He had been missing for so long, everyone assumed he must be dead. The official explanation is that he had amnesia, and he was wandering in a fugue state. But even doctors are baffled by this case. It's incredibly rare for someone to lose their memory of such a large chunk of time, and it still leaves so many unanswered questions. His story was included in a psychology case study in a book about amnesia, but even experts have been unable to figure out what actually happened. Kibaki had already earned a degree in linguistics before he went missing, but he was so fascinated by his own case that he went on to earn his PhD in psychology. He wanted answers about his own disappearances, and yet he still couldn't find them. Solving the mystery of his missing year became an obsession, and he went on to publish a book called Mathematical Foundation of Existence, Gold, Quantum, God and Beyond. In it, he writes about the possibility of alternate universes. In 1981, an 84-year-old man named Maurice DeMaze went topaz hunting with his friend David McSweeney. DeMaze had a PhD in theology and in the 70s had said in several publications that he believed the Antichrist was coming. He wrote that the devil would appear as a political, religious, commercial autocrat of the world. They drove to Pike National Forest in Colorado. Once they were in the park, they had to drive 16 miles down a dirt road until they reached a spot called Topaz Point. Native Americans claimed it was haunted by evil spirits. Early settlers called this place the Devil's Head, which was a very interesting coincidence considering his theological background. Morris could barely walk because he had bad knees. He needed David to help him down a small hill to get to a sandy digging spot in the forest. When it was time to leave, David walked to Morris' digging spot to say that they should go in about 10 minutes. He went back to his own digging site 150 yards away to clean up his tools. But when David returned to Morris's spot, the elderly man was gone. With his bad knees, it would have been impossible for Morris to climb up the hill on his own, and he couldn't have gotten far into the forest, yet he was gone. He honked the horn, called for him, and searched for a long time. McSweeney flagged down a nearby car and asked them to find the police. While he continued the search, the local authorities searched for 5 days, and yet they never found any evidence. The police closed the case, claiming that they did all they could do. The May's wife sent a letter to the governor of Colorado to reopen the case, and she never received a reply. After Paulides created a mini documentary about the case for Missing 411, pointing out that there have been a cluster of similar disappearances in Devil's Head. After premiering in the mini doc, the police reopened the Morris Demers case over 30 years after the disappearances. In Feb of 2018, a Canadian man named Danny Philippides was on a ski trip with his friends in New York. It was around 2 p.m. and they had been skiing for hours. They were getting ready to go into the lodge, and Danny said that he wanted to go on one more run down the mountain before their lunch break. By 4 p.m., Danny was failing to return any calls or texts, and the friends were concerned. They began searching for him, and after being unable to find him, they told the employees at the lodge that he was missing. A team of 130 people scoured the mountain without finding him. 6 days later, Philippides' wife received a phone call. She didn't recognize the number, and it sounded far away and static. It was Danny's voice. He was incoherent and confused, and then hung up the phone. She called the number back and pleaded with him to call 911 for help. So he did. He had no idea where he was, and he just described his surroundings. When the paramedics finally found him, he was still wearing all of his ski gear and in need of medical assistance. He was holding a brand new iPhone, and someone had cut his hair. Somehow, he ended up in Sacramento, California, at the airport terminal car rental depot. He was 3,000 miles away from where he disappeared. He couldn't remember how he got there, and he had no idea what day it was. When he learned where he was and how long people had been looking for him, he got very overwhelmed and emotional. The leading theory is that he was kidnapped in the back of a big